Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. Welcome to It's Time for More Injury Funding, the podcast for all who want to learn about legal funding and its significance in the personal injury, products liability, medical malpractice, and many other types of law practice domains. I'm your host, Laura, founder and CEO of More Injury Funding, the legal funding counselors with passion for law, medicine, legal funding, and heart for all suffering individuals. More Injury Funding is a sponsor, member, associate, or business partner of this podcast, Academy of Truck Accident Attorneys, Sandy Springs Bar Association, Georgia Association of Paralegals, Atlanta Legal Aid Society, State Bar of Georgia, and Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And we're adding a couple more sponsorships coming up soon. In today's episode, we have a very special guest, Paul Sabaj, who is a lawyer, son, friend, colleague, and an advocate for justice and for those who are injured and suffering physically, mentally, and emotionally. Paul is a founding partner of a boutique law firm based in New York City, Sabaj Law. Welcome to the program, Paul. Please tell us about you a little bit.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me. So yes, everything checks out. I actually, since you mentioned you're down south, I actually have been born and raised in Poland, but then I came to US for my another law degree, graduate studies at Stetson in Florida. So after graduating in Florida, I came up to New York City, and well, I can say 14 years later, the adventure still lasts.
Oh, that's awesome. I always love seeing my people from Europe, especially from our parts of the world, so in case nobody knows or somebody doesn't know, Lithuania has border with Poland and we have a long history there, but that's another episode, the lesson of history.
It was one country at a time.
Exactly, for many, many centuries. So we kind of, blood mentally and in every other aspect related, neighbors, I guess, family, almost.
Absolutely. Brothers and sisters.
I love it. So today we'll have, we'll dive deep into the topic of class actions. And so Paul will explain what class actions are, how they differentiate, because to be honest with you, I don't know much about class actions. I know the term, I work on them when it comes to legal funding, but don't have the perspective from attorneys world or, view of a point of view. So can you, Paul, explain what a class action lawsuit is and how it differs from other types of lawsuits?
Right. So usually when you hear about lawsuit, it's an individual lawsuit where you have individual plaintiff against individual defendant, or let's say a couple of plaintiffs against a couple of defendants. Now, with class actions, it's different. It's a lawsuit where group of individuals have similar claims against a defendant. Usually it's one defendant, it's a corporation, and collectively they bring the case to court. This is very different than individual case, because there's also different types of class actions. There's multi-district litigation where you have many courts involved in different states in the same type of a lawsuit, and the defendant may be the same. You have mass torts claims that bring grounds to class actions. So there's many different ways of basically describing as a situation where many individuals have a claim and they come together and they start a lawsuit. Obviously, their attorney starts a lawsuit against a corporation, and usually it's a large corporation that harmed a lot of people. And it's a lot about justice and getting this widespread harm basically somehow fixed.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. What are some examples of situations where a class action lawsuit might be appropriate?
Well, let's look at recent cases. For instance, you have a manufacturer where they say an example, 3M, a company that was manufacturing earplugs, right? And they have had contracts with the U.S. government to deliver those to the service members in a number of millions. And then many individuals that used them basically suffered because they were defective. So it is important to recognize also that among class actions, there are different types of subclasses that may arise during the proceedings. For instance, it may be one manufacturer that used a product, let's say talc, and then the talc was in different products on the shelves of the supermarkets. So is it the same type of a lawsuit? Yes. Is it the exact same class? No, because we have a class that was harmed by one product and we have a class that was harmed by another product. But it may be within the same lawsuit, and it may be within basically the same proceedings that we are going against that one defendant. So those are like the recent landmark cases that I would say materialized in settlements or were concluded. And I'm talking about very recent, like a month ago cases. And there's plenty of lawsuits that sometimes get consolidated. So it's a little more complicated than we have time to get into the details of it. But I can tell you that this is a broad area in terms of litigation, and it definitely is very, very exciting because there's a lot going on in those class action lawsuits.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very, very exciting theme for myself as well. That's why I will want to learn as much as I can, besides my listeners and viewers. So how does someone become a part of a class action lawsuit?
Of course, there are certain websites that almost inform and educate the public, I would say, so to speak, about the ongoing investigations and litigation. So people would have to evaluate what happened to them, and then they could, if they want to do preliminary search, they may join a class action that already exists. But if they have an issue and they never heard of it, they don't really want to research, I would rather recommend that they come to an attorney for a consultation, because consultations in those cases are free, and it's much better than just looking up something online. So they come to an attorney can evaluate what type of case it would be, where it would fall, check if there's any case out there that already speaks to the issue or addresses the particular product, defendant, corporate defendant, and then either join a class action, help the person establish a new action, and then look for other plaintiffs from that area that were affected. Because mind you, it may be a product, but it may be a distributor of a product. It may be many different ways that the product makes it into the market and harms the consumer, right? So there's different ways of approaching it. So the person has to definitely consult an attorney. Usually medical records are crucial, and some sort of an expert evaluation. And then definitely from there, the attorney would guide them what to do next, and how to, for instance, approach the case. Should it be an individual case, or should it really be a part of something bigger?
It's interesting. So my understanding is that class action cases are lengthy. There has to be a certain period of time in order to classify for the class action. Is that correct? Because it just came to my mind. Let's say when you said the delivery of the product could be, in trouble per se. So, for instance, that may be a bad example, but that's what came to my mind. Let's say, cow milk gets bottled into plastic gallons. The little the boxes, and then there is some maybe toxic material that affects the consumers. So would that classify as a class action?
It may. It definitely may. The numerosity of potential plaintiffs is one of the factors that the court would consider in basically classifying case. And there's a special type of motion that we have to do after we start the case to show there's a class, and we want the certification from the court, right? So it definitely may be. So if you think, just to put it in lay terms, if you think of a harm that you have suffered or somebody else in your family at the moment of when it happens, and you think there's more people affected the same way by the same product, company, or a set of circumstances, it's highly likely that this is going to be a class action. Now, again, sometimes the injuries or harm may be very different, and it may be large enough that you want to be excluded from class action. So that's something for you and your attorney to discuss. So if your injuries are of a high value, you may not be better off as part of the group, because the settlement of $6 billion, $10 billion is going to be split among the plaintiffs, let's say equally or differently between the subclasses. But that being said, that's why we treat every plaintiff individually. Now, when they come to us and, for instance, their injuries are large, but to prove the case, to handle the case, would not be individually, would not be prudent or possible, then they have to join the class. So again, it's a matter of analysis. There's many PhD basically papers on it. We shouldn't get into the details. If we're talking to a layperson, they should know that, hey, if it happened to me, probably it happened to my neighbor. Okay, that's very likely when you're going to come to your attorney that he or she is going to evaluate it in terms of a class. Now, if they only do individual cases, the individual plaintiffs' cases, they would most likely refer them out to someone like the firm like us, or they would join already existing lawsuits. So it's a very complex area of law, of litigation to practice, and it's definitely very, very deep in terms of analysis.
Very interesting. What would you say are the benefits and drawbacks of participating in the class action lawsuit? You mentioned that that would be individual people, but then if there's any settlement decided on, once it is decided on a settlement, it would divide most likely in equal parts. So what would be the benefits and drawbacks in participating in one or agreeing to participate in a class action lawsuit?
Well, definitely, when the class actions started, it was about a very little harm to people that wouldn't be able to sustain a case. They wouldn't be able to basically go through with the case. It wouldn't make sense for an attorney to handle the case. But at the same time, that's those small cases, let's call them this way, they also deserve a day in court. They deserve justice. So then the class as a whole makes it basically available, makes it a tool for the public to use to address the small harm in a large scale. Now, there may be cases where the harm is large and it's still important to come together as a class and pursue the case as a class, as a group. Usually you have large corporations on the other side, and you want to be able to fight. And as a group, it may be more prudent, because remember, you need an expert for each and every case. And for complicated cases, complex cases, you may need few or several experts. And budget-wise, it may make sense for the group to pursue such case, and the group may be stronger to pursue such case, right? Sometimes a landmark case, there's this case that then, let's say, establishes a precedent, and then everybody else follows, and then it becomes some sort of a precedence that everyone follows. But again, it depends on the circumstances, and that depends on the individual facts of the case. I would not tell, just without deep analysis and conversation with the particular plaintiff, I would not say, oh, your case is definitely part of the class, or it should not be part of the class, it should be excluded. There's a lot to it, but this tool is phenomenal. This vehicle of a class action, phenomenal for the public to hold companies accountable for what they do, because the harm may be sometimes minimal on its face, but it really a harm to the public is huge. That's also part of why those cases are so important. But we also have cases, as I mentioned, like talc cases, talcum powder cases, where the product causes cancer. I mean, you can't imagine more harm to a person than being exposed to something that is carcinogenic and then possibly dying, right? So, and it's also part of class action. Like, I mean, it's a class action in itself. So hopefully, that we just touching upon the surface of what it is, what it can be, or what it can be not. But hopefully, at least we will get people to think of cases of what happened to them as cases where potentially there are other plaintiffs. And if you think, oh, my harm is only little, nothing really bad happened to me, that would be so outrageous that I would go to an attorney. Please don't think this way. To the contrary, actually, don't underestimate the harm. Don't underestimate the value of what happened to you. And I'm not talking only about monetary value, but also about changing the policies. Whatever the companies out there are doing, sometimes we change the world one case at a time. We make history because by numerosity of many small cases, individual cases brought together as a class, we can change the entire industry, and this is beautiful. This is beautiful. That's why we do it.
That's why I love law so much, and that's why I love talking to you today. Now,
I'm not talking too much. Sorry, it's just I could talk about class actions for probably
forever. This is your religion.
Straight.
I know that. That's wonderful. Now, can you walk us through the process of a class action from start to finish? And I know we could write a book on this, but try to stay within maybe a few minutes, just to give a basic steps. What is involved?
Well, first of all, there's an investigation stage, right? We got to investigate the claims that the plaintiff is making, or potential plaintiff at the time yet, before the complaint is filed. And oftentimes when we recognize this is a material for a class action, we go to experts. We talk to experts. With more complex cases, one expert is not enough. There may be an overlap between different areas of expertise, and we need somebody to opine on different things, chains of events. So we do then, when we find grounds for starting a class action, we do file a complaint, and then we go to court with a motion for certification. We need to demonstrate likelihood that it is a case that meets the numerosity of plaintiffs, and also similar harm, the same type of harm. We notify potential class members. We try to obviously look for other people that were affected, but they don't know. They may not know yet, or they don't know because they will, for instance, never know but they were harmed. So then we obviously, there's discovery process like in any other case, gathering evidence, negotiating settlements, and then going to trial if this cannot settle, this case cannot settle, and depending on the case specifics. It's a very complex and multi-stage process because we have to take into consideration what's best for individual plaintiffs and for the group as a whole, for the society. And it's usually there's good judges that are assigned to those cases, and they do a pretty good job in balancing those equities, let's say.
Okay, so based on your personal experience, have you worked mainly with other attorneys as co-counsel from the state of New York, or have you collaborated with other attorneys from different states?
So we file state cases that are class actions, and we file federal cases too. But collaboration is necessary. It's just so important. I mean, there are cases that are very local, don't get me wrong, and may not need anybody in different jurisdiction. That's also true, but there are cases that are just, as I mentioned before, multi-district litigation type of cases. And sometimes we get plaintiffs and we start the case and we realize that somebody also is handling the same type of a case somewhere else, and we should try to collaborate in terms of making the process most efficient for everybody. So that's why the community that does class actions is, I would say, very supportive and very, I don't want to say small, but kind of. We basically know of one another, and part of our job is to check the dockets, check if anybody sued the same defendant. It's like part of due diligence in this litigation and prosecution of those cases. Like, you have to find out, maybe there's history that the company has, that they were doing certain things, like wrongdoings happen over and over again. And there are companies that are basically never changing their ways. Wow. So collaboration is very important. And as I said, sometimes we do get plaintiffs and they come to us later than somebody else came to a different firm. So depending on the stage, we may be the first ones, we may be later starting a complaint. That doesn't mean that there's any difference in how to handle a case. You gotta always prepare it the best. Just to go to trial and just to win. You got to be prepared to go to trial. That's it. And I got to tell you, insurance adjusters, defense attorneys, they share notes about attorneys, plaintiffs' attorneys, and the plaintiffs. They do. And they know what kind of people they are dealing with too. And plaintiffs and plaintiffs' attorneys, they know. And once you establish certain reputation, you do want to maintain it on a good, really level. So we always prepare to each and every case like it was going to trial. We always try to collaborate with other attorneys that have cases. Maybe we're going to help them to catch up on the case. Maybe they have something from their state that we don't have, but it's going to help our case too. So absolutely, across the board, we got to work together.
That's a great attitude. Now, can you tell how are the damages or settlement amounts determined in a class action lawsuit?
Well, this is the hardest part, as I said, for the experts really to evaluate how to determine the damages. Usually, there has to be set of experts and sets of documents that we would rely on from economic experts and economic damages to obviously, let's say, doctors and projections that would have been prepared for the case. So the hard part is also distinguishing how to divide the settlement among the class members and how to make everybody whole. And it takes time. It's a process. That's why those cases take time. They last because nothing is easy. But even the individual cases are harder and harder over the years. But especially with class action lawsuits, it's that's why I also mentioned before, sometimes we do want to exclude the plaintiff from a class and pursue an individual case because their damages may be very unique, very different, and they do want to prove at trial a specific number, specific amount. So instead of dividing the settlement between class members equally fair, there may be a plaintiff that deserves to be treated individual in that case. But this is up for analysis. This is up for, experts, sets of motions, judges, and plenty of negotiations.
Very interesting. So we are down to 4 minutes with some change. We can go two ways. We can either continue with the new Zoom because I have the free version for 45 minutes, or we could do. It's up to you, Paul. You tell me. Or we could just wrap it up quickly.
Restart?
So
You want to restart?
We can restart. Yeah, we can.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you're going to be.
I won't be able to restart.
Moderating the entire interview, and you're going to be. Cutting portions, or
that's fine. Yeah. So
we can reconnect and go on. I wasn't really expecting from myself to be talking that much, but I as you can see,
you're
I'm
an
excited
attorney.
about it,
You're an attorney, and this is your baby, so you get excited. I totally get it. You trust me, you're not the only one, and I love it. I'm a talker myself. So okay, so we are down to 3 minutes. So let me ask you one more question, and then we're gonna finish this up. It will just automatically turn off. I'll create a new new Zoom, and then I'll send you the link. Okay, and we'll continue.
Well.
All right. So let me think for a sec. Okay. So what role do attorneys like yourself play in the class action lawsuits, and how are you guys compensated?
So generally speaking, class action lawsuits are contingency cases, and the court is going to approve any compensation to the attorney. So the role of an attorney may differ in a way that someone may be a lead plaintiff and a lead attorney, and somebody may be basically as involved as much, but not taking the lead because, let's say, they started the case later. But that being said, the role of an attorney is, like in any case, crucial because you gotta you gotta push the case, and you gotta be prepared to address everything timely so that the process doesn't drag. That's one. Two, you gotta make sure your client is protected in many ways, and then the compensation for all of those actions is set by the court at the end. So I have no doubt in my mind that people have certain trust in the court system and in the fact that the compensation is fair. And as I said, there's so much work involved that also the time is a factor in handling such cases. Usually, again, we don't get paid until years after. So all of that is taken into consideration, and but the percentage is fair. It's like in the individual personal injury lawsuits. It's nothing out of the ordinary.
I see. So Paul, tell us please, do you have some notable, memorable examples of successful class action lawsuits that you worked on throughout the years?
Plenty. I'm just thinking what to bring up right now. I mean, I just mentioned to you one that we weren't the lead attorneys, but we were involved with the talcum powder. I do plenty of class actions in state and federal court in New York, and we don't shy away from starting them like as our firm. And because there's certain law firms that tend to, for instance, join in on class actions. We basically like to start our own cases if possible, but there are many that are not novel. I would say novel as issues. But for instance, I can tell you the one that is ongoing still, which is an interesting one.
That is.
That we have against a vitamins and supplements company.
Ooh.
And the principals knew that they were contaminating products. And imagine they were actually, Department of Justice had some interest in the cases when they found out that specific hormones were added and basically regulated substances were added and contaminating the vitamins and supplements. So we are handling a case against Blackstone Labs. The principals really went to jail and confessed. Now we're handling the civil side of that entire ordeal, I would say, because that was just horrible to find out what people were taking as vitamins and supplements and what was inside. So that's an ongoing case that, for instance, recently we started. So
it's huge.
I mean, there's so many cases that even as to educate the public. I'm again not mentioning any specific website, but I'm saying there are complaint boards, there are websites that list class actions, and those class actions are from mentioning, let's say, pharma companies that were producing and pushing drugs to consumers that they shouldn't have, to appliances or cars that exposed people to harm. So actually, to educate the public, I would encourage every single person that's going to hear this recording to go online and look up either our website, to see our social media, to see cases that we've started, but also to go on other websites that list the class actions that are pending in courts. And then if you recognize that you were affected, or anybody that has any experience that is described in those cases, to contact attorneys like us to basically pursue a case, to join in, or to start your own individual case, because that's why we have that vehicle, as I said, in the court system, to protect, educate, and then seek justice and bring those corporations to the table and hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm. So, Paul, how do you balance these cases with, when you consider them ethically, from the ethical perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, those cases have a lot of ethical challenges, and for instance, we want to bring justice to everybody, right? And all the consumers. Sometimes we are going to represent by default the public, and even those people that are not part of the lawsuit, didn't sign up with us in terms of retainer, we want to protect their rights too. So we got to think of that consideration. We ethically want to make sure that everyone is compensated. And how do you balance if they get the same amount of money, or should they somehow be differentiated? And then on top of that, there is an issue of, okay, people are harmed, they are out of work. What do you do? How do you help them? They may not be even eligible for workers' comp. So then we try to help them in many different ways. Maybe find a different profession, maybe just get by getting funding and temporary living expenses. We got to help them how much they need, how much really they can take against the case. Like with any individual case, they need surgery and they have no insurance, no health insurance. Are we going to help them fund the surgery, right? So it may be that actually a whole case that we need to fund in terms of expenses for across the spectrum. So just to advance the case, just to push it faster, just to NFL litigation, concussion litigation. Remember that was funded. Almost all those players were out of play. They had to get funding. That's up your forte. I'm just proud. It's up your forte. I'm probably overlapping, but they were out of work. They needed funding until the case is over. So we are also involved in that. It's really helped. We're not necessarily being compensated for helping plaintiffs get by, but we do want to do good by people.
So what would be the consequences or the effects on plaintiffs? Give me some examples. You mentioned cancer. What else?
All sorts. I mean, it's hard to imagine anything else worse than cancer, right? Or only the imminent death is worse, I think. But disfiguration, long-term effects like asthma, long-term effects like, we had cases against the manufacturers of medical devices. Look at the hernia mesh, look at the hips that were faulty, that were actually placed in human bodies. So that's huge. Look at the harm that was caused by manufacturers of certain vehicles that caused accidents, and you have all sorts of different harm to the body and psychological harm to people, right? I mentioned also 3M earplugs, that also the litigation that recently materialized in a settlement where people lost hearing, and then they were affected. They are affected for the life. We have class action lawsuits about contamination of certain and pollution of certain areas where people are going to suffer. They either suffer already, they will suffer, And the extent of it is kind of unknown, because everybody can react differently to certain chemicals. So, acetaminophen recently was linked to ADHD and autism. And people say, how do you mean? Well, if it was taken during the pregnancy, the likelihood and chances of the baby developing in the womb or being, already born are much higher accordingly to scientific studies, right? I'm not a doctor, but I'm going to rely on the doctors and the experts. And this is huge. This is something that European Journal of, I believe, a European Journal of Medicine published. We're going to see those cases in US. We're going to see cases in US being handled in Europe and resembling one another. But mind you, why class action cases are so important? If you think there's safety in the products that you eat, consume, or use, like deodorants, you're wrong. The chemical compounds are just sometimes horrible. They cause cancer. You have different ingredients that go into food and, let's say, deodorants in US and in Europe. So whichever regulator and legislative body realized sooner and first, they banned the substance. Or whichever system realized first, and because there was a court case, then it changes the entire society, and the playing field is different. But sometimes it's too late. Sometimes it's still early enough. We can prevent more injuries, but without class actions, just we would really be in a disadvantageous context.
So of course I have so many questions when it comes, just like, memories or thoughts rolling through my mind as you talk now, like deodorant, for instance. Can't think of the ingredient right now from the top of my head that, it's not, I know it could cause potentially cancer, or high fructose corn syrup in Coca-Cola, that everybody drinks Coca-Cola worldwide. What about that? Like I know, for instance, I love Coca-Cola, guilty of that. That's my guilty pleasure once every few months. But I always look for the Mexican produced Coca-Cola because it has the real sugar, because I know real sugar is better than high corn fructose syrup. In the United States, we still use the bad version of it. So how long for this, for this particular example of Coca-Cola, how long would it take to remove that high fructose corn syrup from Coca-Cola in the United States?
Right. It may take actually a lawsuit or two.
Wow.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's the ingredients, as I said, like soap, palm oil is used, right? In one continent, it's not used in the other. And why? And maybe because of the environmental issues, not only to humans, but to chimpanzees and other animals. So, there's harm that we don't necessarily recognize as a harm to human beings, but environmental issues and animals that they suffer. I mean, this is also subject to scrutiny and to litigation. So thank God for that. But yes, I mean, talcum powder in deodorants, it's just it's horrible. It's and all the other chemicals. Sometimes the manufacturers don't have to disclose them. And that's the part that is the most scary.
That is scary.
But it's kind of easier to spot with the pharma industry, like right now. But also the doctors sometimes, they don't prevent it. They just write scripts for right now. We're investigating. It's not in a lawsuit, but Ozempic. Diabetes medication and sugar, blood sugar levels medication, and people were just abusing the system by prescribing it for weight loss.
Which is,
And the
I know a few people actually from my immediate circle who've been using it, and I see
celebrities use it. Yeah,
I
they
see a
talk.
dramatic result. I even thought it's like, I'm trying to eat healthy, working out so hard, But so I see dramatic result, but in the back of my mind, it's like, exactly. How will it affect, the health of a person in the long term, or once
So
they get off that medication?
we talk about this amongst law firms, and we're all
Mm.
right now in that field. We're investigating what happened. Really, there's so many people that suffered, like they went into coma.
Oh
If you
God.
don't, if you apply too much of it, uh, that may be very
Wow.
bad in consequences.
Mm.
So I know of people that were actually harmed by it. Now,
Mhm.
is it the manufacturer's fault? Is it really the doctors, or did pharmacies also contribute? It's up for investigation. But trust me, that's the tool to ensure public safety. If we don't have those cases, and we don't pursue those cases, the public would be in such a bad
Mhm.
shape
Mhm. Mhm.
as to safety.
Mhm.
Thank God for.
Mhm. 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 So we touched some on plaintiffs. Now tell me, how does a class action lawsuit affect the defendant, especially if the defendant is a large corporation? How do they get affected?
Well, large corporations usually have stocks that are publicly traded. So first the fact you see is um, a fact on as to value of the company.
Okay.
But that's something also we have to consider in terms of potentially being able to compensate and satisfy the plaintiffs. But
Mhm.
the defendants usually are corporations that defend their product. They stand by the product, and they are not eager to admit any wrongdoing or for their fault and take
Mhm.
liability upon themselves. How does it affect them? Uh, well, large payouts, usually the insurance policies wouldn't cover the payouts. One
Mhm.
of the risks that we're facing as plaintiffs bar is the fact that many of those huge corporations have subsidiaries. They try to push the assets amongst the subsidiaries, and then bankrupt one or the other. And it's also a big thing. We got to educate the judges. We got to seek help from the judges to prevent that. Johnson and Johnson filed for one of the companies filed for bankruptcy to avoid settlement, and they were denied such request.
Mhm.
Same with 3M. They, through their companies, tried to avoid liability for the earplugs and not to do the payouts, just to go into bankruptcy and then say, oh, not our problem. That was also not successful. So thank God we have a good legal system that really prevents large corporations from cutting ties with the problem and the lawsuits, and cutting basically corners that way. But we got to educate the judges first in the lawsuit, because we got to bring in the experts that either educated us on the matter or we educated them. We basically picked their brain and then pulled all the pieces together. And then we have to educate the judges to make the case. And then we have to make sure that our clients get compensated. Because if the defendant goes into bankruptcy, that's the biggest challenge. We get nothing. The plaintiffs get nothing. How are they gonna? They suffered harm already, and now how are they gonna live their lives if they can't pay their bills? They can't go back to work, or whatever they have. They need treatment. So sometimes we got to evaluate that too in terms of a settlement. Is it better to get the insurance policy? Is it better to settle for something above the insurance policy? Is the company able to sustain it, or are they going to be really defunct, right? And they are not going to be able to compensate the plaintiffs. So it would be, in an ideal world, everybody would get what they are entitled to, and it would be lovely if we could get them what they deserve and some. Sometimes there's not so many assets available, and we have to somehow come up with a formula to make sure everyone's okay at the end of the day. So there's so many components like that sometimes clients don't know about. People that are just in the same industry, but they don't do those cases. They don't know about like what kind of hoops we have to jump through. And at the end of the day, the companies are, you asked how are they affected? They are. I mean, if they settle the case, there's a huge payout, and it's going to shake them, and hopefully they will survive. They're going to change their ways and give back to the community. That's the goal, right? Part of the settlements that we make, oftentimes it's change your policies, change the way you operate, change the way you treat people that make claims, how you change the way you receive complaints, and what you do about them, how fast you react. So it's beautiful when we can achieve it, and everyone's happy, right, at the end of the day. So among the challenges is getting the compensation and making the company survive, pay out, change their ways. But recent example, after the last big settlement, the shares of the publicly traded company went up 5%, even though the payout to the plaintiff was in billions of dollars. The shareholders, all the stakeholders realized, like, okay, we can move on. We can now go back to making money instead of worrying if the company is going to go bankrupt. And it was good for everybody, because they didn't want to settle. But then they finally settled. And look what happened. The shares went up 5% the same day.
Which company is this, may I ask?
The recent lawsuit for 10 billion settlement, Johnson & Johnson.
Johnson & Johnson. Poor Johnson & Johnson. I feel always bad for them. They get sued all the time. They need to make some changes there for sure. That's a name known in the world.
Same with 3M, 3M also. There's so many companies in the holding, $6 billion settlement. And what happens when they settle? When they settle, everyone is relieved, because shareholders now know, okay, at least we can pay out and survive. We can go back on track of making money, right? It's so there's so much to it. There's such so many pieces to the puzzle, and as sometimes people call it game theory in all of this, that they don't teach you that in law school, and it's exciting but complicated at the same time, and stressful.
Life stressful for sure, but also very, it's good for everybody, at the end of the day. Now, we're running a little bit out of time, so let's make this quick. What are some recent developments or changes in the law related to class action lawsuits, specifically in New York, state of New York, and also maybe in comparison to other states? I'm not sure if you're familiar with laws in different states or your surrounding states.
Well, in terms of different states, not that we would go dwell deep into the state law, but on the federal level, there were precedent cases that allowed for many changes and many cases to go into the next stage, let's say. But the most important thing that I just mentioned was the fact that bankruptcy courts, because mind you, it's a federal court, but a different courthouse and a different judge that's hearing the bankruptcy. So the federal bankruptcy judges now recognize the risks of allowing the companies to go into bankruptcy and not being held accountable for their actions. So I think this is the biggest one. This is the major change, because it was too easy to get away from liability and responsibility for those companies. So I think that those are the changes. There's plenty of smaller ones and some precedent cases, but again, I don't want to talk for 40 minutes just about this. That the most important one is the fact that we now have a playfield where everyone can really get justice if it's possible, and not fear that, okay, this is going to be another bankruptcy and we're never going to get to trial because the assets are going to just evaporate. So at least this notion in the recent years has changed, and I think this is crucial. This is the most important part.
I love it. Well, that was very interesting and unique way of presenting class action lawsuits, and just barely actually scratching surface of it. So I really appreciate the story, and answering all these very complex questions. And I know we would need to actually write several books, if we wanted to cover a little bit deeper. But if anybody gets, or feels like they've been harmed in any way, and then they may feel that they may qualify for a class lawsuit action, how can they find you, Paul? Do you have a website, social media sources?
Both, of course. I mean, the website, sabajlaw.com, is the easiest way to get in touch with us, through the website, calling, emailing. And we do have social media accounts. There's a LinkedIn profile for Sabaj Law, and we're happy to answer any questions there. I have my more so professional, but more so individual profile on Instagram, Sabaj.Attorney, and we're available. I'm glad if I can help. It's, even if it's not a case, I'm glad if I can answer a question, help anybody. This is my calling. So
that's nice. Yes. And Paul, how do you spell Sabaj? Just for people who weren't
thank you for asking, because yes, it's European way of pronouncing it. So it's S as in Sierra, A as in Alpha, B as in Bravo, A as in Alpha, and J as in Juliet. So at the end, it's J. It's like Sabaj.
Sabaj Law.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. But so thank you again so much, Paul Sabaj, for being my very special guest today on this Time for More Injury Funding podcast. But before we conclude today's episode, as promised, I'm not going to let you go without asking this fun pop-up question. You ready, Paul?
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So in your own words, what associations does word vacation bring to your mind?
Definitely travel. I love to travel. I travel a lot, thankfully for business. Sometimes I travel, but also privately, I love to travel. So I know it's very popular right now. The new term was coined, staycation. So people stay in house. And no, it's not me. I need to, for my sanity, for de-stressing, and then also exposing myself to new ideas, to creative thinking actually happens when I travel to a completely different place, different culture, and I do a little bit of soul searching there, and then looking around at different ways that create new neurotransmitters in my brain, and it lets me solve issues and challenges and problems that I have every day. And when I come back, I'm just rejuvenated and I'm just pumped to go ahead and do more of the business that we handle.
Because we need you, Paul. We definitely need you. So when is your next vacation planned for, and what's the destination?
It's for Thanksgiving, and I'm actually going to be going to Bora Bora, so that I could enjoy myself, at the beach and doing nothing but enjoying the weather.
We would love to follow you there, but I know you want to stay by yourself with your thoughts. That's so wonderful. Again, thank you so much. That was Paul Sabaj with Sabaj Law, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening and watching to our story about the class action lawsuits. For more tips and tricks on legal funding and personal injury law related topics, follow me, like, and subscribe at More Injury Funding. And it's time for More Injury Funding podcast on Spotify, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Yelp, Google business profile, and my website at www.moreinjuryfunding.com. That's with 2 O's. And also the podcast is available on all main podcast platforms worldwide. So whenever you are, Bora Bora, New York, California, New Zealand, Europe, anywhere you can, access and watch us. And if you're interested, we would love to continue this topic of class actions and hopefully bring Paul back to us again soon. I can't wait to see you, my dear listeners and viewers, and at my next upcoming episode. Tune in soon for our next guest. Until then, be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Pleasure being here.